It's an incredible thing as I rise to speak on the Industry Training and Apprenticeships Amendment Bill, that as the rest of the country is celebrating the blowing up of Parliament, and when some parts of the country are celebrating a more indigenous event, and that is the events at Parihaka, the events about peace. And at a time when the opposition is trying to assist the government and support this bill, we have the mad rantings of the members of the government. And how amazing it is, how amazing it is that otherwise respectable members like Tim McIndoe should want to go back 10 years but refuse to go back to 1992. How is it that members like Colin King can talk about the last 5 years, but his brain sort of does not compute when it comes to 1992? And then there's Cam Calder, who had the temerity to talk about the vast army of the living dead. Well, I thought he was talking about the National Party conference a few weeks ago, but of course he was talking about the age of industry training during Labor's government. But again, he failed to acknowledge the disaster zone that this government left apprenticeships and industry training in the period between 1992 and 1999. That government, that party, when it was in government the last time, all but destroyed the hopes and the dreams of young people in this country to get on and get practical skills, to get apprenticeships and to do on-the-job training. That was its legacy that the last Labor government had to pick up and address and fix up, which they did with aplomb from 1999. Let's not forget the damage, the vicious damage that the national government from 1990 to 1999 did to industry training in this country. And they all hang their heads in shame, as they should, as they should. And I am still waiting for the apology. I am still waiting for the official apology. Maybe the next generation, the young bucks of the National Party, the Simon O'Connors of the world, who when he can't run a full marathon has to run a half marathon, but that's still an achievement. We don't detract from that. But fresh from his half marathon, plodding over the bridge, maybe he can offer the apology for what his predecessors did to industry training. Let's make no mistake. But I want to say, in the spirit of generosity, and as we, the parliamentarians of this generation, hunker down while the Commonwealth countries celebrate our blowing up, let us hunker down and let us offer them this support. This bill stands in stark contrast to the National Party's last efforts, last time they were in government in 1992. The 2000s were about rebuilding industry training and apprenticeships in this country, because the truth is we had a massive drop-off. And you talk to tradespeople today, you won't talk to many under the age of about 45, because they will say, where is that generation behind us? And there's an emerging generation of those who started their apprenticeships under the last Labor government. They're in their late 20s and early 30s now, but there is that big gap. And there are those who are in their 60s now, those who are in their 60s waiting to retire at 67 and pick up their superannuation. Some who are being asked by their employer, and I know New Zealand First supports us on this, because they want a universal superannuation just as much as we do. But I've met tradesmen actually, because they are all men. I met one recently. At the age of 68, he has been asked by his employer whether he would be happy to work for another 5 years so they can get the latest group of apprentices up to speed before he can retire. And he's a linesman. He cannot, because, Mr Hayes, I have a lot more years to offer this Parliament than you do. And the people have wired up, and will have something to say about that. But I have to say, yeah, I have more, maybe, and I venture to suggest I've probably offered a bit more to this Parliament in the last 2 years than the honourable member has in his time here for a lot longer than that. But I want to say this, that there are some 68-year-olds, Mr Hayes, and you might want to take a lead from them, who are keen to retire, who want to make way for the younger generation, and but because they are in trades occupations, their employers are saying to them, we need you to stay. And these are tradespeople whose job is to clamber up ladders in the dead of night during the fiercest storms of Canterbury and the rest of the country to restore the power and make sure that we can all snuggle up in our warm beds. snuggle up in John Hayes' warm bed in the Wild Upper. No, not with him. No, he can snuggle up in his warm bed, but the rest of us don't have to join him. But they want the tradespeople to be able to do the fantastic job they do, but they are an ageing workforce. And so we have to do more. And Mr Anadako over there, they need his client companies, they need their tradespeople as well. And maybe one or two of them will be pulled from Kaikoura. Although Colin King wasn't so sure. But, Mr Speaker, we need those people. We need people to be going into apprenticeships and into industry training. And this bill will go some way to do that. There's a couple of things I want to comment on about it, Mr Speaker, because this is important stuff. Apprenticeships are important. They have been important in this country for, since the age of Julius Vogel. The only premier that took seriously, for a long time, the rebuilding of infrastructure. Of course, now we've got a generation of politicians that wants to sell our infrastructure, but at least Julius Vogel had the vision to build our infrastructure, and he understood the value of apprenticeships, which is why we've had them since that time. And we've been very thankful for those generations of workers, of indentured tradespeople who have come from other shores to add to our industry training and apprenticeship training capacity, and that's been very important. Industry training is very important too. On-the-job training is vital. There is part of our cohort who don't take easily to sitting behind a desk and learning theory. They learn on the job, and they are a very important task too. And we have world-class on-the-job training. We've had world-class on-the-job training system under our industry training legislation, and we need to continue that. The reality is, as we know, and as I think this government knows, and we would acknowledge too, where we had got to in the 2000s were some ITOs who were more into empire building and building up their accumulated reserves than they were on training people. And I agree with the Minister, and I agreed with them at the time when I was a union secretary, with the criticism of those industry training organisations who could boast extraordinary bank balances, but not much by way of the output of industry training and apprenticeships. And so it was right that there should be some reform. It was right that there should be some rationalisation. And one of the very good things that this bill will do is to set up a program and a means for proper rationalisation. I remember when I sat on the board of the Tertiary Education Commission and we were dealing with industry training organisations. There were about 46 of them at that time, including one I remember very well was the New Zealand Equine Industry Training Organisation. They only had 7 trainees, and it's appropriate that I should mention that on this day of great equine achievement and equine training achievement indeed with Mike Moroney and his achievements at Flemington today. But the New Zealand Equine Industry Training Organisation only had 7 trainees, and we did wonder whether an entire organisation should be built around that. But the Tertiary Education Commission at the time had no means, no levers to pull to not just encourage but sometimes compel those amalgamations and mergers, and now we will have the means to do that. One point I do want to make, I just want to acknowledge the strange sort of approach to the tripartitism. The industry training organisations also always reflected a level of tripartitism. The current legislation provides for workers' representatives and governance, and of course employers. This makes explicit the role of employers in the governance, but then in a section it goes from section 6 for employers on governance to new section 11 for workers' representatives to be in the governance of it. I'm not quite sure why that should be reflected in that way. There will be some questions, I think, that will be raised as we examine this on how existing industry training organisations manage themselves. I think the building and construction industry training organisation will stand out for attention because one of the problems they have there, and this is an industry that is crying out for more apprentices, hasn't had them, and that is partly because 50% of their apprentices up to now have been labour-only contractors, haven't been under conventional employment agreements, and we might want to say under this legislation that we should have more conventional arrangements to encourage apprentices, but we will support this legislation, Mr Speaker. We see great hope for it, and we will examine it closely in this committee.
Call Simon O'Connor.